Usually it's me interviewing people for our podcast. Today I've put myself in the other seat and agreed that Vicky, one of our other counsellors, can interview me. So I'm going to let her take over um, and ask me essentially whatever it is she wants to know or what she thinks other people might. Um, and we'll see how it goes.
Sounds perfect. So obviously everybody wants to know who you are, why you started the charity, what you have been through. So if you want to take me back through some of your decisions, some of your history, and what you would feel comfortable sharing with everyone on the podcast. And then I'll ask you some questions, help you lead the way a bit, maybe get some clarifying sometimes. But yeah, be mostly just you sharing your story.
Okay. So I guess the easiest place to start is at the beginning. So I started Muma Nurture a long time ago, maybe 8 years ago. So I started making plans for opening this place at the beginning of 2017. So 8 years ago now. At which point in time, so my mum turned 60 and I had my 60th period since I had officially started trying with my ex-husband. I was clearly officially infertile. We were not on the same page at all. We weren't entitled to any NHS help in terms of IVF or whatever to help us have a baby. I'd have self-funded that and actually have done since, but I guess that's a whole other chapter for maybe later discussion. Like, we just didn't have the same ideas about the whole thing, and neither did we have the same level of importance. So, I mean, to get me to that point, I mean, yeah, infertility is a long and rocky road, I think. And I can honestly say the one thing that had never ever occurred to me was that we would start trying and what would happen was nothing. And that's exactly what happened for all those years. Like, I think 5 years of officially trying, there was a bit of unofficial before that. I mean, the reason that we weren't entitled to any NHS help is because he already had children. So our worries at the beginning were it would happen too soon, it would be too much for everybody that was already there to adapt to, like all sorts of weird and wonderful worries that actually nobody needed to worry about, because what happened was just absolutely nothing. Years and years of nothing, and increasingly me becoming more and more upset and self-loathing as time went on. So I absolutely bore the brunt of that responsibility. Like, he already had children, I did not. I think medically there was far more emphasis put on me. I had far more testing, and also because he had children, the assumption was it was me. But also, I don't know, there's so much messaging out there in the world about how having a baby is the most natural thing to do. We're all on the planet to reproduce. I just felt like an absolute failure as a woman. I really felt like there was something wrong with me. And I feel like all of that stuff was really compounded by my experience of, like, so we had gone for a certain element of kind of medical support. We'd been to the doctor, we'd had testing, it had shown nothing conclusive. We had gone away for our obligatory 6 or 12 months, gone back, been referred on to the fertility specialist, had all of the additional testing and whatever there. Again, it found nothing conclusive. We were diagnosed with unexplained infertility, as I think is the case for about 25% of people. that are struggling with infertility, clearly. So there was no real reason, and therefore there was no real, like, there was nothing to work with. Do you know what I mean? But there's lots of advice out there. That's quite female heavy. I felt like the medical process was quite female heavy. I felt like so much of it compounded this idea that the problem must be me. And maybe that's who I am and the way that I internalise stuff. But I don't think all of it is. I've heard the same story many, many times now. So I got myself to a really obsessive state of affairs at some stage where I was so convinced if I could just do the right stuff in the right order, it would work. So I am, well, as is probably demonstrated by the fact that I've started a charity and we're still running successfully and supporting people this many years later, no matter what's going on around the outside of that, where many others have kind of folded in the way. Like, I'm an achiever, like a high level achiever, maybe an overachiever, whatever. Like, if I decide I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I am not accustomed to deciding that I'm going to achieve something and not being able to do that. I literally couldn't manage that level of failure. And I'd got myself into this quite, like I say, quite obsessive place of, if I can just do the right things in the right order. So I wasn't drinking, smoking, had cut out caffeine, kind of detox. So I've read all this stuff about toxins and kind of detox the house and stopped using bleach. And I used to be quite a bleach lover, but I was quite insistent that there was too much toxins in that, and it might, interfere with my pH levels, and same for like having baths. And there was so much stuff I was essentially denying myself in life, where when I look at it now, as kind of the neutral observer of my own life and others, I think sometimes the stress that we put upon ourselves in that drive to do the right thing actually outweighs any benefit of doing the right thing. But at that point in time, I couldn't see the wood for the trees. I was absolutely fixated by this idea that my fertility dropped off the cliff at the age of 35, and therefore, like, pushing so hard to try and achieve pregnancy, I guess, by that time. And then when it wasn't at that time, kind of trying to level with myself that fertility is a continual and gradual decline in reality for each individual person, and it's just statistically that it looks like that. Fertility rates are also based on birth rates, not anything to do with anyone's actual fertility. So I started to really educate myself about some of this stuff in order to manage my own anxiety and feelings of failure, essentially. I also was a counsellor. I was continually in counselling throughout that time, which is probably about the only thing that kept me sane. And I was actually a baby bereavement counsellor at another organisation. So alongside my personal journey, I was also collating professional knowledge. I mean, unbeknownst to me that at some stage that would kind of marry up. I also have a lot of qualifications in other holistic therapies. So I've been trained as a massage therapist, a reflexologist, a hypnotherapist, all kinds of weird and wonderful things. I actually am just fascinated by people, how we work, that kind of mind-body connect. Is what happens in our body about what's happening in our mind? Is what happens in our mind to do with our body? Is it both, a combination of all, whatever? I don't know that I know any answers, and the more I know, the less I think I actually know. But people fascinate me, like, just as a whole set of beings, and the fact that we can do what we do. And I kind of came to realise that far from, as people say, getting pregnant being the easiest thing in the world to do, it's actually a really long, chain of chemical reactions that all have to happen
Mm-hmm.
in exactly the right order at exactly the right time to achieve that. And then it needs to keep happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's far more complicated and in-depth than maybe we give it credit for sometimes.
Becomes quite a long, drawn-out process.
Yeah. So I guess the level of the peak of my kind of crazed intention to become a mum, I guess, was maybe 2015, 2016, that kind of time. In 2015, I turned 35, and I think at that time I started to get desperate because of the belief that my fertility had fallen off a cliff. At 36, my nana died, who was like my favourite person. I had been pregnant unsuccessfully, which is also a whole another kind of chapter and set of stories that we're not prepared to go into. But at 16 and at 26, and I kind of believe that maybe having survived those experiences, when my nana died, she told me she was going to have a word with himself and make sure I ended up with children. And I just thought, oh, maybe this is it. This is my year. And I kind of tried to move away from the crazy and the desperate and into the balanced kind of adjustment and acceptance. And clearly by then I'd been in therapy a long time. Mm-hmm. I realised the craziness wasn't doing me any favours, and I kind of I'm saying crazy as an offhand comment. I know many of the people that come here feel like they're crazy. Like, there literally isn't a thing that you can say in this room that will ever make a person here go, oh my god, that lady's crazy.
No, definitely not.
Most of us have got our own kind of personal experiences and we'll absolutely identify with that. Mm-hmm. And at the very least, we'll have the understanding that the strain of the situation can sometimes make us feel like we are going crazy, but actually crazy people don't know they're going crazy. Mm-hmm. And the strain of such a kind of unfulfilled set of circumstances can certainly make us act outside of what we would see as our norm.
Yes,
definitely. I think is the reality.
Definitely.
So yeah, through 2016, I'd kind of come to this more balanced place with it, a bit more peace, but genuinely only because I absolutely, hand on my heart, believed that was going to be my year. Get a bit upset now because we got to the end of it and it wasn't.
No,
it didn't happen. And I literally couldn't believe that it still hadn't happened.
Yeah.
Throughout the time, like the whole period of time, I am more towards that kind of time. I have tried so many different therapies and therapists, and I really believe in kind of looking after yourself. And even if you don't believe some of the quirkiness about what they say some therapies do or whatever, like to give yourself time and space and invest value in self and at least give yourself some relaxation. So I'd been doing all of these things, but I think only because I totally believed I was getting a payoff. Yeah. Like, I literally like, we have people here all of the time that say, they tell me to relax and I've scheduled it in and it's still not working. And I think that was me. Yeah. Like 100% that was me, because I got to the end of that year, I still hadn't had my baby or even got pregnant, and I felt cheated.
Yeah.
I could not believe I'd invested all of this stuff because I absolutely only did it for the payoff.
And then it feels like another loss, doesn't it?
Oh, I've really come to a place where I think infertility is grief. What it is compound grief. So there is nothing tangible, but every single month you go to the toilet, you wipe, there's blood, and you're devastated. Like, and then really soon you need to get yourself back on the horse, because you've got to just live in hope that, okay, that wasn't the month, next month can be the month. And straight back onto it, and then you're probably just going to deal with exactly the same thing the next month. Like, I can't tell you how many hours I spent. We used to have a downstairs toilet. on that downstairs toilet floor crying. Because I just felt like I couldn't cope with it anymore. And then it was like, pick yourself up, dust yourself off. Excuse me. Because if you ever want this to happen, you've just got to keep on going. And I think, excuse me, that is one of the hardest things about infertility. Like, I think it's the total lack of any control. And I, much like everybody, but I struggle with not being able to control. Like, I totally struggled with if I do X, Y, Z, I should get, well, baby, that's where I was at, and it just wasn't happening for me. So, 2017, we hit the 60th period. It was just done. Absolutely done. I was so done with trying. I was so done with feeling so alone with it. I just felt so isolated. Like anyone in the world understood how I felt. And least of all, I felt understood by my partner. And I think, like, infertility is one of those situations, it's make or break. I'm not saying it wasn't the only, it was the only issue. Like, clearly there were others. But, that whole thing, I think, was the beginning and end. But I came to a place of, I don't think this is going to happen to us. And also, I'm not sure there can be an us, because I'm not sure that I can be a partner to somebody who is a parent and doesn't care that I'm not. Because sometimes it felt like all I cared about, really. Like,
and you felt alone in that. You felt there wasn't a support there from him.
Well, or anybody. Like, I really didn't. And still to this day, I maintain, I don't really think there's anyone much that understands how that was or is for me.
I think that's probably like that for everyone. Because we're all so individual and we're all insular in our own feelings, our thoughts, our wants, our desires. And as you say, because infertility is almost one of those quieted subjects, people don't really talk openly about their infertility with their friends, their family.
Absolutely.
Because they feel shame. It should come naturally.
I think it's surrounded by secrecy and shame. I also think that you and I could have exactly the same experience and the impact would be different because we're different people. And that's what I mean. Like, so I can't tell you, like, the amount of people over the years that have said, I know exactly how you feel because no, you don't. Like, if you're like 10 years younger than me and you've already got children, you have no idea. Like, if you are 10 years younger than me, you had a 10-year struggle and you're still with your original partner and you've got children or whatever, like, you definitely don't. Like, there's just
so many variables.
Like, and I feel like we'd be much better placed to kind of just accept that we don't understand how each other feels, or maybe we think we might be able to, but we understand that we might not. That kind of, like, I want you to feel supported in your pain, but I understand that I might not really understand how that is for you. So I guess that's where I got to at that point in time. Was I'd been to see loads of different therapies and therapists. I felt like often, not all of them, some of them were absolutely lovely and very professional, but for the most part, I felt like there was a promise to get me pregnant. And when that didn't happen, the failure was seen as me not following the process properly. And I got to a place of, I absolutely believe in therapies and therapists. I do. I also think people need to be qualified, experienced specialists, members of professional bodies, work within an ethical framework. And I think there are necessities and reasons for that. And it's because it protects the people they're supporting. There's a lot of quackery around, for want of a better phrase, and at points, like, you know, I hear stories, horror stories, about people that have handed over untold amounts of money to people for, you know, weird and wonderful things. And I think, yeah, no, like at certain points in time, that absolutely could have been me. And there were definitely things I tried that were outside of my comfort zone. And yet, oh, worth a punt, because absolutely I'm going to try anything. You're telling me this is the thing? Okay,
Yeah.
I'll give it a go. So I came to this place where I thought there was a need, but also the potential for a place where people could come physically. At the time, it was only physically, but physically or otherwise, where they would feel understood, accepted, like they belonged, no longer isolated. Like, whatever their experience and whatever their outcome. Because in the midst of my journey, I mean, I belonged for a relatively short time to a fertility support group that I was booted out of. Very unsupportively. But also there was a period in time of that where I upset somebody within that group because they'd got pregnant, and I was so angry at that point in time with anyone that was pregnant. And I'd gone to a fertility support group that I thought was a safe space to be able to talk about how I felt. And then there became a bigger problem because it had upset somebody, you know, somebody else within the space that could and should have been safe for me. But then clearly that wasn't safe for her. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just got to this, like, are our experiences or outcomes the measure of us? I don't believe they are. Like, I believe we should feel safe and supported, whatever the issue, whatever the outcome. And if stuff like that happens, to kind of call it out and deal with it openly, like put it on the table. Maybe understand that the emotional impact of a lot of these experiences, that's what bonds people. That's where the shared experience is, not necessarily whatever. And actually, if we could deal with that openly and kindly, like, maybe it'd all be a bit less shameful and secretive. Because imagine getting all the way to the point where you've asked for support and then still being made to feel shamed because you hadn't done it right. And because, you know, I am quite a strong character, I guess. I think often when people are managing me, they assume my ability to manage myself and therefore provide me with less support than they may others. You know, and that teaches me something, which is that sometimes those ones that seem louder and more resilient and whatever, you know, like, of course they have resilience. But if they are asking for support, it's because they need it, and they are just as entitled as anyone else. Also, maybe they have that level of loudness and resilience because that is how they've learned to cope. Maybe they've always had to be self-reliant and whatever, and they really need it more than anyone else does, you know. Questionably, we all believe in our own needs and whatever, don't we? So yeah, I started to spring this idea that there might be room for a space where people could belong. And actually, the therapeutic support was quality, professional, you know, followed all of our ethical guidelines. People were trained, qualified, had additional training, were supported, had supervision. You know, maybe there were other therapies available, but they worked within the same kind of ethical framework, and we could. So people only had to come once, tell their story, and if they saw other therapists within that space, we weren't going to keep re-traumatizing them. Because one of my experiences of going from therapy to therapy to therapy and therapist to therapist was having to keep telling my story and just feeling like, what?
Reliving that sense of failure constantly with every person you had to tell.
And it is re-traumatizing. It absolutely is. And it doesn't really achieve anything for me. Like, it's all about the therapist and their need. Because actually, like, depending on what you're doing, how much information do you really need from people? Like, when we're counselling, people choose what they tell us. Like, and I mean,
you
know
find
how this
out
works.
the things that you need.
You often get big kind of information downloads in chunks as and when people feel like they trust you and they're ready to share that. You're not pushing for give me more, give me more, give me more. No. I need to tick my boxes. So essentially that was my kind of idea rambling around my head, and Muma Nurture was born. So at that point I was infertile and prepared to accept that to some degree. Probably not, to be fair. I'm not sure I ever reached a place where I was actually willing, able, I'm not quite sure what the right terminology is, to accept that I would never be a mum. Not sure I ever got there. And the thing about grief, as we know, is it's best processed when we're done, like when something's finished and we can grieve the loss of it. If we're not sure that we're done, it's quite a hard thing to process, which again is a good reason for good quality therapeutic support and counselling. Because a counsellor can understand that. A counsellor's worked through their own stuff and is not going to be projecting their own unresolved whatever's onto you, and all sorts of other things that make absolute sense within the counselling field. Do you see what I mean?
Of course.
So Muma Nurture was born. We originally were in an office in town. We had a couple of therapy rooms and a kind of bigger reception group space. Over time, we kind of built a team of volunteers, and throughout the week, Monday to Friday, we'd have 2 team members on shift, kind of one admin volunteer, one therapist, and people would come and go and book various appointments, and we had various kinds of support groups and community groups and whatever running. And actually at that point in time, we were fairly self-sustained through client donations and fundraising. So maybe I should backtrack a little bit. When we opened in 2017, we were a therapy centre, like a business essentially. Fairly quickly, people started coming for the support we had to offer. Often they couldn't afford to pay. IVF or, just generally not having money meant that not everybody that needed our support could afford to pay for it. And I never turned them away. That was how we started the route to becoming a charity. I made a decision really early on that it felt more important to me that people got the therapeutic support that they needed at their point of need than that we exchanged financially at that point in time. Clearly, it wasn't a sustainable business model. And I have had the mickey taken out of me endlessly ever since that I would never be any good at running a business, because that's just not a good business model. I know that. I've run businesses. I was quite successfully self-employed for a number of years before that. And I actually came from a business background. But see, this means more to me than the straight exchange of cash. Does that make sense? So I just didn't have it in my heart to say to somebody that really needed our support, oh, I'm sorry, you don't have the required amount of funds. You need to go away and come back when you do. So I didn't do that. That was my personal choice. For a while, I self-funded the charity. So I worked in private practice to earn my money, and my money mostly got invested back into the charity. And that essentially, was part of the way that we were sustained. Client donations started to increase. So we became a charity officially in October 2018. With a board of trustees and the ability to apply for funding and whatever. We have always been funded, we've always been a bit hand to mouth. We've always been funded project by project. We've never got any of that long-term kind of reliable funding that I think people quite often assume that we have. And that's the way it's been. So in those early days, we had that office in town, all of that stuff was going on, and we were kind of doing quite well. And then COVID happened, which kind of changed everything for everybody. I, at that point, got stranded in another country with the person that is my now husband, but wasn't at the time. So I ran. So I don't know how to explain COVID. COVID was like an anomaly, wasn't it? I guess it was for everybody.
Yeah.
So for us, we had it on the radar because of pregnancy, and pregnancy quite early on had been peaked as a high risk. So I can distinctly remember on Friday the 13th of March, we had this massive charity event. COVID had literally not entered Eastbourne, like nobody had even ever heard of it. Oh, I can vaguely remember the woman at the venue saying, oh, there's all this stuff about COVID on the news. So I've put one of those hand gels near the front door. If anyone's worried, just tell them to use the hand gel, right? So, I mean, I'm not sure what we thought that was going to achieve, but there you go. That was our effort. And then on the Saturday, it was suddenly everywhere on the news, and it was all seeming a bit more like big news, I guess, like a bit more ominous and a bit more, relevant to us or whatever. And I can remember moving my flight forward for my holiday, thinking, oh, it seems like at some stage they're talking about stopping flights, so I'm going to move it a bit forward because I do still want to go on holiday. And then on the Sunday, it really ramped up again, and they turned some flights around. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
So there were flights going to like Spain or whatever, and then getting turned around when they got there. And I'm like, I think I might not get to go at all if I don't. So I moved my flight to the Monday. Also at that point, they declared that pregnancy was high risk. So I knew that we were never going to do anything to risk anybody's like much wanted pregnancies. Most people at that point in time that were coming to us, if they were pregnant, they had struggled to get or stay pregnant previously, and that we didn't know what all this stuff was about, and there was no way that we were going to risk those people in any way, shape or form. If pregnancy was high risk, we had to shut our clinic. That was what we were doing. So I knew on Monday I was going in to shut the clinic, and I also moved my flight to Monday because at that point in time they were talking about shutting things down for 3 weeks, and I thought, oh, well, if we've got to do everything online, I'm basically going to have an extended holiday in the sun. Like, the worst that's going to happen is I'm going to take my original flight home, which is in 6 weeks. So we're just going to get a 6-week holiday and try this working online malarkey that everyone talks about. So on Monday morning, we'd had a few like group texts. We had a WhatsApp group, I think, much like we've got now. Like, who can come in on Monday and help us kind of shut down. Most of the team were in on the Monday because we obviously had to clear down from the event on Friday that had just been dumped back in the office, and it was a clothes sale. I mean, there were second-hand clothes everywhere. There's all sorts of stuff going on, like who can come in. So I went in and said, right, that's it, we're going to close. All this stuff seems to be really important. There's this thing called Zoom. So let's cancel any appointments like today and tomorrow based on what we've heard on the news, make it official that we're closing. We'll restart everything on Wednesday, but we'll do that online. By then, everyone needs to know how to use this Zoom thing. As it turns out, not many people needed to learn how to use the Zoom thing because most of our volunteers were busy home editing their kids or, just totally swept up in everything else that was going on. So, I mean, for much of that whole COVID thing, it was me and a couple of trustees. And I did most of our counselling and actually started kind of applying for some grants and stuff because obviously all events had stopped, everything had stopped. And there I was, stuck in Morocco, is where I was. In terms of I went into the clinic and said, that's it, we're closing, that's what we're going to do, we need to know how to use Zoom. And by the way, I'm off to see if I can get on the last flight out of Gatwick. It wasn't the last flight out of Gatwick, but it was the last flight to the destination that I wanted to go to. And my friend was coming to pick me up at a certain time to get me there. I can remember going to the airport, her filling my bag with, I don't know what way round it was now. Paracetamol, maybe, because you weren't to use ibuprofen, or maybe the other way around. There was something or other about the painkillers, and I'm like, I really use painkillers anyway. Why are we so obsessed by this? So I got to the airport. Gatwick was really empty. Like, all of the sandwiches in Boots were reduced to like 30p or 50p. I was like, I'll get two. I might never eat again. was just the most bizarre experience. And the whole time I was there, I really wasn't sure that my flight was going to go, but it did. We got on the flight. There was like 7 people on it. There was an air stewardess stressing because we needed 8. We needed to sit a person by each emergency exit, and there was 8.
Okay.
There's only 7 people on the flight. I don't suppose it matters much.
No.
Like we've all got an exit each. That's not what normally happens. When we got off the flight at the other end, there was a man at the bottom throwing your suitcase to you as you got off.
Oh wow.
I thought, this has never happened before. Everybody else on the flight looked distinctly Moroccan. I looked like the only white person. And I was like, I all seem like they're going home, but this flight's probably getting turned around anyway. Didn't get turned around, we got there. And as we walked into the airport, they pulled the shutters down. I can remember at that point in time, I thought, yeah, I hope I'm going to be all right. Yeah. And then they had basically shut the country. Then they were sending tourists home. I was a bit, shall I go? Shall I not? It's going to be 3 weeks, isn't it? Like, it's not like I haven't been there before. It'll be all right. And also, there's like thousands of people trying to get out. I've just got in. Right. I ended up there for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I came home for a little while. And my husband couldn't get here because he needed a visa and they wouldn't let him have a visa because of COVID or whatever. So I went back, and I can remember somebody like in the work circle saying, "Oh, are you sure you want to? You might get stuck again." And me going, "Lightning doesn't strike twice." Does, because I got stuck there that time for about 9 months. I think it was about kind of 18 months in total. And yeah, that time we got married and we came home together. Because by then we decided we just wanted to live together wherever that was, and it was all too much worrying about visas and being in different countries and whatever. So yeah, that's how we came to be here. But I mean, in the time that we'd been over there, we'd had several rounds of IVF. So we actually, which often quite surprises people, still have 3 high quality day 5 embryos in a freezer somewhere in Morocco. When we came home, the day before we came home, I'd had an embryo transfer. So I was absolutely convinced that was our baby. And again, it wasn't. And then I spent a long time feeling like we'd really done the wrong thing coming home. And I'd essentially abandoned my children in another country. And it's tough. Like, actually, people think, oh my God, who would do IVF abroad? And I bet if you had it there, it was rotten. I can hands down tell you that the service I received there was so far above and beyond what I received here. It was unbelievable. Like, the IVF clinic was immaculate. Everybody was so kind to me. Like, they always ensured that I had staff that could speak English, or my husband was present at everything, even if that wasn't standard procedure. They made adaptations to make that okay for me, so that I felt okay. Like, it was all okay. Apart from that, it didn't work. So that wasn't our first round there. It was our second. It was a frozen transfer from the first round. So I think it depends who you are, what you count as a round versus, you see what I mean? Like, some people count only fresh rounds as the round, and then the frozen transfers afterwards as that, and some people count every round as a round. So we had our initial round. All went quite well. I think we got 9 eggs, 7 fertilized, 6 developed into embryos. Like, that's quite good stats. We had 2 transferred the first time. Again, we'd had all these tests. We were interestingly put on kind of a 3-month health plan, me mostly, to kind of reduce my weight and make sure that I had the right kind of hormone levels and stuff. So I was given, and that my egg quality was as good as it could be. So I was put on like a high level kind of supplement regime and stuff, which is fascinating because a lot of places here will tell you that you can't change your egg quality. Like, so there's kind of two schools of thought where some people think you can and some people think you can't. And I am kind of in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, if we think it might happen, why don't we give it a go?
Yeah.
So yeah, we'd done all of that. We had 2 embryos transferred. Got to work at it and all this stuff. I was in the weight bracket, like whatever your BMI is supposed to be. Like literally just skated in onto that fence into the normal weight range or whatever it was I was supposed to be. Yeah, no, that didn't work. Like, before we even had to take a test, I started bleeding. And I was in such excruciating pain, which I think I had never prepared myself for. I literally sat in the toilet for like hours. Probably sat on that toilet for about 6 hours, I think.
Wow.
In the end, I had my sister texting me from England and my husband hammering on the door that if I didn't get out of the toilet, he was going to kick it in and carry me to a hospital or whatever. And I had such a dichotomy, because I really wanted to sink into the abyss of whatever, grief, regret, and a bit like we were saying earlier about the kind of horrible merry-go-round of infertility when you're just trying naturally. I also wanted them to let me go again for the next cycle. So yeah, like that was my, if I seem upset or insane or whatever it is, they're never going to let me go again. So I need to pull it together and I need to be okay. And for whatever reason, like, because it does seem a bit insane, but I think you just can't let go of the desperate hope that you might actually be a mum if you do this shit.
Yeah.
I managed to convince my husband and the doctor, who were both quite reluctant, and that's an understatement, to let me go full steam ahead into the next cycle, to let me do exactly that. I can remember we drove around half of Agadir to find a chemist that had the right drugs, because I needed to start taking them again the next day. Like, it was just such a bizarre experience.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, I was so devastated. Like, an IVF's gross. It is gross. I can only imagine, like, the only thing I think that would ever make it okay is if you had a live, healthy baby at the end of it. Like, aside from that, like, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
No.
They should use it as a torture element in war or whatever. Like, it is gross. Progesterone pessaries. Who, what, why? Like, of course I get all those things.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's something quite insane about the fact that you're surrounded by like a predominantly male medical team, having to deal with really quite intimate stuff, like, that they just cannot understand. Like, no one can understand. Like, and the reality of being told, like, so progesterone pessaries, they ooze, like, it's gross. They literally ooze all day, and to be told, like, oh yeah, that's okay, you can circumnavigate that if you insert them anally. Like, it's just like this really normal.
Yeah.
Like, this conversation's not normal. And like, oh, like, whatever you do, like, you're not making me feel bad to say that to me.
You're jumping through a lot of hoops.
Oh, God,
it's dealing with a lot of icky stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, I will say, over there, like, the clinic did all my injections. Well, save a couple, because we'd convinced them. I don't know that we'd convinced them, but, you know, like, we had a bit of negotiation and we were like, well, it's fine. Everybody does all of their own in England. And we did a couple because of the particular point at which we needed to start if we were going to do it in that cycle. I believe it was during Ramadan or something similar, which meant that the medical team weren't available at a certain point. But yeah, apart from that, like, whatever time of the day, night, whatever, you either went into the IVF clinic or the associated maternity hospital, and somebody would do your injections for you, talk to you about whatever was going on. Like, it was really, like, they were really caring. And yet given all of that, it still didn't work.
Mm.
So yeah, we came back. What happened with that round was nothing, which by this point in my life I was kind of getting used to.
Mm-hmm.
So we had, like, pre-IVF, we didn't just launch straight into IVF. Like, pre-IVF, we had done a whole year of trying and whatever. But I mean, at this point, I was in my 40s, maybe marginally, but I was, and kind of petrified that we were getting to the point that I would never, it would become impossible. So after a year, like, bang on, that was me. Like, let's just go to IVF. In actual fact, my push was let's just go for egg donation IVF, because then I know probably, like, it's more likely I'll get pregnant.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened to me in all these years, so I by now I'm convinced the problem's me.
Yeah.
And actually, we were going to go to North Cyprus to do egg donation IVF, and then Morocco had like a further shutdown. So they were letting some flights go to some places at some point, not the UK. And then that just stopped literally on the day that we were going to go, or the day that we'd got ourselves organised.
Yeah.
And at that point, I was devastated. And it was like, I just feel like life, the universe provides things in really odd ways that at the time you're like, you're ruining my life. And then actually it turns out for the better at some point.
Yeah. There's a saying, the door may be shut, but sometimes their window opens.
Yeah, like, I feel like it's absolutely like that. Like, I spent years crying about not being able to have a baby, and now I'm entirely grateful that I never did with that person, and this is the way my life worked out. Like, it's just really odd. So yeah, so that happened, and then there was this really weird thing where we got lost somewhere and ended up standing in front of an IVF clinic when we didn't know that there was any there in that country. And then, you know, by some random turn of events, we ended up going to the IVF clinic. And then he ran all the tests, the doctor there, and was like, there's no reason for you to be looking at anyone else's eggs. Like, your numbers are fine. Your numbers are fine for somebody 10 years younger than you. Like, I don't know who's told you they're not. Like, I don't have a single doubt in the world that we can get you pregnant. Like, it's going to be fine. Which might have added to my kind of deep belief that it was going to happen. But also, I think you have to have the hope to carry you through.
Yeah.
So yeah, we had our 2 rounds there. Didn't work. Like, so we came home after the second one. When we got here, we were given a date for testing and kind of tests to bring home and whatever. And by the time we got to testing day, there'd been no bleeding, no nothing. Like, we were due to go to my niece's birthday party, and I'm like, I want to test before I go because I just want to know. I mean, there's like 2-week wait just seems so insanely long. Like, never has 2 weeks been so long ever. Well, although I have since obviously been pregnant and had babies, and there's been several 2-week waits in those times, and yeah, that does seem just as bad. But yeah, there'd been nothing, so we were entirely hopeful. And we took a pregnancy test. It was negative. We were told to wait 2 days and try again, like, do another test. So we did it. It was negative. We were told to do the same again. On the 3rd time, we were told to take a urine and a blood, so you can literally get like a finger prick pregnancy test, which I didn't know until that point. Both showed negative. They were like, yeah, whatever's going on, like, you're not pregnant. You're just gonna have to wait. Like, literally, I think I'd been on for 2 weeks after that or something until I bled. And that whole time, I can distinctly remember that whole time, although we knew for a damn fact I could not be pregnant. I think I took some more pregnancy tests as well, and they were all negative. I still held this little hope that something somewhere must be wrong, and that might actually be our baby. And it wasn't. So then we were there, back here, had embryos there. Everything here was still like really weird. It was like June 2021 by this point, July maybe 2021, that kind of time. It was all still really weird. Like, we'd done none of the like queuing at supermarkets, but all that kind of weird stuff was still going on. Like, everybody was wearing masks all over the place, and we'd been so far removed from it. Like, we'd been living in this little seaside village. It was all so overwhelming. We tried to find out. I did find out about getting our embryos moved over here. Like, so there was a period of time where IVF clinics here were shut down, and then they were operating, but like within a kind of strict COVID regime. And when that started happening, I found out about getting our embryos here. So we could have done that for the cool price of £4,500 before we even had any additional treatment. And we just thought that was a ridiculous waste of money because we could probably spend that and have another round of treatment. I was obviously getting older. I was never going to get any younger, nor my eggs. It seemed like if we were going to take a cumulative gamble, like if we were ever going to have another fresh round, it seemed better to do it like sooner rather than later. So we did that. The worst round I've ever had. Like, absolute waste of my time. We just about ended up with one embryo, I think, that they were worried about on day 3, so they called me to go to the clinic and have it implanted. I think with hindsight or a bit of sensible sanity, you'd have been like, no, this is clearly going to be a failure, I'm not going to bother. Also, I'm not sure on the kind of financial connotations of an abandoned cycle. But no, I rushed over because, with hope.
Yeah.
And testing, like, so we'd set up this whole round. I don't know that it was intentional at the beginning, but definitely we'd got towards this place where testing was going to be Christmas time or there or thereabouts. As you know, charity closes at that point in time, so testing was within the closure. So I was going to be off work, I was going to be fine, I had time to kind of hanker down, look after myself, whatever the outcome. But obviously, third time lucky, Christmas, and for all this stuff to get here, like, definitely our baby. And actually, I didn't get my Christmas break. Like, we were at work one day. Like, at that point in time, we were in an office in Hampden Park. We had a little tiny office that we used to rent from like Age UK. The week before Christmas is heinous for us here, as you probably know. Like, we have all this fundraising stuff going on, so you've also got to like shut down all the clients and whatever. Like, nobody's going to come in and see you for 2 weeks. People are trying to get like cram in their last minute appointments. You're trying to deal with all the fundraising stuff, shut down everything for the end of the year, whatever. We're in that last week. It's absolutely manic. And at some point, like when you feel that feeling, like, and you've got your period. Yeah. So I'm in the office, like rushing around doing something. I had so many appointments that day. I can't even tell you what. And I felt that feeling. Now, quite often that happens when you've had IVF or whatever, because you've got all this progesterone and whatever, and it's just oozing. But I went to the toilet and it was like prolific bleeding. And like I say, I was busy. Like, there was no way. There was 2 of us at work, but there was no way I could have got out of what I needed to get out. So I had to go home, get changed, like get showered and changed. It was that, like, whatever. And just go back to work, paste a smile on my face, like, get through the rest of the week. I don't think I've ever had to deal with anything so horrible.
Yeah.
Like, I was so devastated. And obviously, we deal with people like me all the time. So it wasn't public information what was going on with me. In actual fact, I'm not sure how much of a shit anyone gives what's going on with me. And I had set everything up as best as I could to know that I could manage whatever was going on. Just had not prepared myself for that eventuality. And that week was probably like one of the hardest of my life.
Yeah.
And then we hit Christmas. And my birthday is just after Christmas, and I turned 42. Like, 42 is the age at which the stats basically stop, don't they? Nobody wants to treat you anymore. I was just devastated. I literally couldn't breathe. Like, it was so much. I always get really upset when I talk about this part of our story because it was so devastating and yet so temporary.
Yeah.
Because the very next Christmas, we had a baby. Literally days before Christmas.
Yeah.
And it just, even now, it feels so surreal.
Yeah.
So because of the timing of our IVF, we had to wait a really long time for a debrief. So it was like end of Jan, mid-Feb or something by the time we had this debrief. Really kind of pointless, confusing, irritating, whatever, where essentially I was told I was just too old. Like, I should probably give up. Like, if I wasn't prepared to move to egg donation, and by that time we'd kind of decided we were. Like, they would treat me again, but they didn't hold out hope. Like, for every unsuccessful round you have, you might think your odds increase, but actually they decrease, and all of this stuff. And, you know, maybe we could try a different drug regime. And, you know, we just think, I don't think I can.
Yeah.
But we know we've got those embryos there. Maybe we'll go back there and do that at some stage. But right now, like, just don't feel emotionally resilient enough to deal with this. Like, it's so much. And I kind of just wanted to lick my wounds a little bit. Like, I really felt sorry for myself at that point. Yeah, like, I just was so upset. And it just, like, you know, was so unfair. Like, I just wanted to be a mum.
Yeah.
Like, and I felt like I'd been through so many kicks, and why was it just never my time? And now they're just telling me I'm so fucking old, it's probably never going to be my time.
Yeah.
And maybe now's the time that I've just got to accept. That's it. You know, like, it's never going to be my time. Maybe my story is that, like, I'm the infertile lady. I'm the lady that set up the charity because she couldn't have babies, and I've experienced everything that we support. But, you know, that's the end of my story, kind of thing. And then I missed my period. Like, I don't know. Like, it was like the March or the April. Like, it was literally just then. I don't know, whenever it needed to be for me to have a baby at Christmas. But I'm still feeling really angry and sorry for myself, and it's kind of ridiculous now. But I think I started to realise that I'd missed my period. I'd also been given some advice that even when we were to have another IVF round, we'd introduce aspirin to the protocol, and we'd do that from whenever. So if I were to ever miss a period, maybe to give that a go, because, you know, sometimes people are experiencing issues trying naturally, and there's a progesterone deficiency or some sort of blood clotting issue, and those things can resolve that. So were I to bleed at all, like even a pink smudge or whatever, I had this stash of progesterone left over from my rounds, and that was absolutely fine to use it. And if I ever miss my period, start taking low dose aspirin. So I thought, I'm going to sulk and assume I'm having the menopause, and I'm going to start taking the aspirin. So that's what I did. And, you know, I'm not in any way advocating that anybody does anything that I've ever done. But what always, I don't know, is a bit of a thing in my mind is I clearly had hope because I started taking the advice that I'd been given. Yeah. But when we got to the point in time, my husband was like, do you think you should take a test? I was, no, I'm so busy sulking, no. No, because I'm fucking old, aren't I? It's obviously the menopause. Yeah. Like when you have the menopause, your period just gets up and walks away.
Yeah.
Like, which generally isn't what happens to people, is it?
But you weren't ready to take the test and have that fear, that rejection,
I couldn't quite deal with another not. Yeah. But, you know, a few days or whatever passed, like it started to feel a bit more of a possibility. And at some stage, we bought one of those digital tests that come in a packet with a normal one or whatever, and decided I'd go off and do it. And I went off and did it. And we turned it that way, and there's a little beeper on those ones when it reaches time. So I turned it over, and we both carried on sitting, staring at this test that said pregnant. And I said, what are you waiting for? He said, what are you waiting for? I said, the knot. He went, yeah, me too. We carried on waiting. And then that not word never came up. There's another test in the packet. Shall I go and do that? Yeah, I can do that. And I did that. Said the same thing. Couldn't quite believe it. We went out shopping. We went out shopping a lot. We ended up, it's ridiculous, but we ended up with literally like a little mountain of pregnancy tests on our coffee table that I had taken, like they were from different shops, different brands, digital, not digital, deep sticks, pee on them sticks, like whatever you could lay your hands on, different, like all different times of the day, different whatever, because I was quite convinced that something at some point was going to say, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And then when we did all that, we were like, oh, okay, maybe I am pregnant. Maybe we need to book a scan. Like, because what we can't deal with at this point is, imagine we get all excited that I'm pregnant and then it's ectopic or it's some sort of hormonal imbalance and I'm not actually pregnant or it's not viable or whatever. Like, if that's going to be the case, we need to find out. So we booked a, I think they're called a viability, no, reassurance scan, something, whatever they call them. We booked it privately, and we waited 2 weeks. Or I think at that point it was probably less than 2 weeks because we'd spent so long taking tests. And we went for our scan, and there we were. Like, yeah, there was a little pea with a heartbeat, and I was hysterical in that room. I think they didn't really know how to deal with me. They did ask if there'd been issues, and that's why I was so upset. Not me, they asked my husband.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just couldn't even, like, it had never occurred to me there'd actually be a baby.
Yeah.
I really thought they were going to say sorry.
Thought it was going to be another letdown.
Yeah, we're sorry, there's no. But yeah, we went, we had our 6-week scan. It was a baby, had another one at 9 weeks, still there. Had our normal 12 week, 16 weeks, 20 weeks. Kept going and going, like, and every time the baby was still there. I don't think I breathed probably until we were a good 20 something weeks in. I can remember we had a lot of extra scans towards the end. My bump was measuring big. They thought the baby was huge. Whatever. They kept thinking that I had gestational diabetes. I never did. But we had we must have had a scan almost every 2 weeks. Maybe a little bit less, but I can distinctly remember getting back in the car at some point, 22, 24 weeks, something, saying, might actually have a baby at the end of this. My husband saying to me, what the fuck did you think we were doing all this for? And I'm quite aware I've sworn quite a lot during this, but I guess that's part of my natural tendency, but also
and it's raw emotion.
It's kind of relevant to this, yeah. But that was genuinely the first time I'd even let myself think it might happen. And I still had this real thing that maybe I was the lady that had to experience everything that we dealt with here. And obviously we deal with really late loss, stillbirth, early infant death. Like, I couldn't even explain to you some of the things that I let myself think through that time. Like, I feel like I was really guarded during my pregnancy. Like, I knew I was in love, but I kind of wouldn't let myself even believe that it could be okay. Like, when I had the baby, there were still lots of COVID restrictions, even though it was like December 2022 in the hospital. So for the most part, we were in the hospital on our own, and we'd gone in an ambulance, and it was all a bit full. It was an emergency C-section in the end, so we were in for like 4 days. I was quite on edge by the end of that, because I kept just watching him. One, out of disbelief that he was actually there. Like, I literally couldn't believe I actually had a live baby. And having a new baby is a lot anyway, like, however prepared you think you are for it. And two, because I was still really worried, like, that I wouldn't get to keep him. That something would happen, because I just couldn't quite believe that I would get to be a mum. I think I've still got a collection going on down here. Yeah, I mean, it really took me a while to kind of slowly settle into the belief that he was mine and I could keep him and he was staying. I did kind of go through a fear, and I guess that kind of enters in every now and then. Now, like that, maybe it wouldn't be him that died, maybe it would be me, and that's how it would end. Um, like genuinely, like I hear so many people's stories, and I really think, oh, that's quite normal. Um, what's maybe not so normal, or is entirely, I don't know, like, is that, yeah, we went through all of that struggle to get the one baby, and by the time I was due to come back to work, I was pregnant again. Definitely didn't think that lightning could strike twice, but was proven wrong again. So, yeah, we now have two babies, and that in itself is a miracle. So when we went for our reassurance viability scan or whatever with the second pregnancy, there was no baby. So I really was like, okay, well, like we got our miracle. That's okay. But actually, we went back into, so we had to wait and go back in 2 weeks just to see, because maybe it was too early, and maybe it was this, and maybe it was that. And it was just too early. We went back in 2 weeks, and there was a baby. And we had this weird thing the whole way through that second pregnancy, where every time we went for a scan, we had to go back again in 2 weeks, because it turned out that they basically thought I was about 2 weeks less pregnant than I thought I was, or whatever. Then eventually, when she was born, she was like 9-11. They weren't entirely sure whose dates were right. But yeah, like we ended up with two babies and two like under 18 months in a really short succession of time. So I'm now 45 with a 2-year-old and a nearly 1-year-old. Yeah, like that just amazes me every day. As to some of the things that people have got to say about it, because obviously me, I struggled so much and I wanted them so much, and that means that it's not hard for me, or whatever people randomly think it means. Or I should just be so grateful I'll never get upset by it, or whatever. Like,
I think almost like your story before is completely discredited because you've got the end goal.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the really important things to acknowledge. I think even though you get to, like, I mean, even just look at the level of emotion I've showed when telling you, like, and I've had a lot of counselling. Like, it is, I guess I've got myself to a place where I'm comfortable enough to share that stuff and the pain. But some of it still elicits that pain in me. Like, and I think it probably always will. Just because I got my babies doesn't mean I don't still feel the impact of getting there. Like, I was still a 42-year-old childless woman. Like, it's mad that I am now 45 and not, like, totally mad. And I will be eternally grateful. But yeah, I mean, there was a long and arduous journey to get there. And here we are.
What does the future hold?
Okay, I got a bit lost for a second. So, like, Muma Nurture, I guess for me, was creating a legacy when I thought, like, one of my ongoing thoughts that I was plagued with when I thought I would never have children is that therefore I wouldn't leave a legacy. And I guess creating Muma Nurture in some way was doing that. Like, and over the years, we have served like hundreds of people, all of which report back that, they're positively impacted by that support and therapy. I'd like us to continue doing that in the way that we do it. So I'd like to expand. Like, I'd like for there to be more Muma Nurture, like actual buildings that people can go to. Like, we obviously offer online support across the UK, but I think there's nothing like this, is there? Like, in-person support. I'd like for there to be more of that out there, but I'd like it to still maintain the integrity of what we do here. I'd like eventually for everybody that needs us to know we're there and to easily be able to access the necessary support. And I think it's always a bit, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, a bit jiggery pokery to make everything happen and kind of service everyone's needs. But yeah, I mean, we're trying really hard at the moment to kind of build a robust and sustainable financial model. Like, we're both wearing new merch, it's out there to buy. Like, that's a way of us building kind of revenue streams. That means we're not so reliant on grant income. So if they're not so successful, we can still do what we do. Like, we've been trying to convey more clearly to clients that although we're not asking for payment for therapy, there is a cost of that to us. So if they can't afford to donate, if they can remember us later on as a charity to fundraise for, it's really helpful. It keeps the wheels turning, and it means that anyone and everyone, when they get to that point, can just self-refer and come in. Like, I want people to always be able to refer themselves, like never to need to go somewhere else to get here. Like, all of the stuff that's really important here, like, I'm so glad, having had my own terrifying pregnancies and babies, that we got to a place where, we just kind of widened out the umbrella and we support people, whatever the issue, whatever the outcome, from kind of prenatal to postnatal. Because being pregnant when you don't know it's going to be okay is terrifying. And being a new mum, I think, is a shock to the system, however prepared you think you are. So the counselling we do, I think, is amazing. Like, I think we've got a phenomenal team, like a brilliant ethos and kind of overview of it all, kind of support system, whatever. I'd love for that to continue and expand, and I feel like we're quite organically doing that as we need to. I don't ever want people sitting on waiting lists for months. I think it's really ineffective and unnecessary. But I'd like to, really build on that, like the kind of community building stuff and the bringing people together. I feel like a lot of that we did really well pre-COVID, and we've never quite got back there. And now we've got this beautiful hub. I mean, it's beautiful inside, so much on the outside, but I guess once you're in here, like, it's safe and it's contained, and it matters very little what's going on out there in the world. And to me, it feels like to have little pockets of that around the country would be lovely, and for people to be connecting with each other more and reducing that isolation. We have some amount of it online, we have some amount of it here, but I'd really like to make that all, extend the offer, make it all more robust and sustainable and stuff. Which I understand is probably quite a lot of just boring words strung together, but I really want people to understand, like, there are 55% of us affected by these issues we support. Like, that's so many people. It doesn't need to be secret or shameful. Like, and do you know what? Like, your issues and my issues, they're not the same, but we can understand each other because we get it. Like, and okay, we're both counsellors, but you don't have to be a counsellor to do that, like, to connect with your community. And when people are supporting each other, they can provide support for each other above and beyond what we can do in this charity here. And it reduces, like, that isolation and the feeling of abnormality and all of the things. Like, if I genuinely had my own way, nobody would ever feel. But we know that resilience is built from adversity and not through ease. Like, you kind of need the struggle. What's that saying on the blue t-shirt? Struggles create strength. I mean, that's the reality. It's just not always a kind reality. And therefore, if we can be kind to each other and we can kind of generate some of that from Muma Nurture, like, I just think that's really helpful for people.
No, definitely. Our experiences make us want to give the support to people that we didn't get ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Is there anything else you would like to add to what we've been talking about?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And I feel like I'm always here. So if I really felt like I had another story I wanted to share, I guess I could do another episode. I guess maybe I'm going to hark back to the, like kind of every little helps and keeping the wheel turning. Like we're such a small charity. Like so much of what's done here is done personally by me, whether I'm on maternity leave or not. Like I'm always invested in doing something. Like even if it's being like the chief cheerleader. We have like 2 massive ongoing struggles, and they are raising awareness and raising funds. If you can do anything to help with either, please do. Like, we all know people that are affected by the issues we work with. And I think what I'm going to say is going to sound rude, and I'm going to say it anyway. Like, if you think you don't know anyone that's affected by the issues that we support, you're just not a person they would tell. You definitely do. Everybody does.
Everybody.
So spreading the word helps, because maybe you know people that you don't think you know that are struggling. I also think some of what we need to do, and I think that's a kind of future job, is demystifying counselling.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think people think it's a thing for people with problems.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think their problems have to be to a certain level to come to us for support. I don't believe that. Nobody here believes that. Like, there isn't a counsellor that I know or that works with us that doesn't believe that everybody could benefit from an hour a week to talk freely about themselves and what's going on with their lives. And that's what counselling is. So you don't need for your problems to have hit a certain level before you